Welcome to Hospitality on the Rise, the podcast about the people shaping the hospitality industry and their journeys. I'm your host, Alice Cheng, founder and CEO of Culinary Agents, hospitality's go-to hiring platform. And I'm here to give you your dose of virtual mentorship. Here, we'll be sharing the stories, lessons learned, and advice from hospitality leaders who've carved out their own path to success. After all, this industry is where many get their start and go on to do incredible things. Whether you're a pro, starting out, or just love the hustle, this podcast highlights what makes hospitality extraordinary: the people. We're so excited to have Chef Phil Tessier with us today, chef partner of PRESS Restaurant and Understudy, which is a project coming soon. We'll talk about that a little bit. One area that I just want to highlight in this intro is 2015 Bocuse d'Or silver medalist, first American medalist at Bocuse d'Or. And we will get into the details of that during the show here. For those of you who know, it's like the Olympics for cooking, where in 2017, he was a coach for Team USA, the first Bocuse d'Or gold medal. Phil, thank you. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, you've got so many great projects going on. You have done incredible things since you joined PRESS years ago. But let's take a step back and share with us how it all began. Like, how did you know that this was for you?
Yeah, cooking for me was, I always had sort of a strange interest in cooking, I guess. My mom used to do this thing where she would take us to the library. You could get any cookbook you wanted, and then we would, make that food. And so, my brother was like, let's make pizza bagels and macaroni and cheese. And I was like, why don't we make strawberry trifle and like Russian style pierogies? So I always had this kind of interest in food, and when I was kind of in those like early high school years, it was kind of like, is this a is this a career or is this just a hobby? And I had started at that point kind of cooking for my family. My mom got off late from work most nights, and so by age of 15, 16, I was cooking for a family of seven. Um, and I loved it. I thought it was fun. Just kind of the reward of also like doing something productive for your family in that hospitality piece. Didn't know what that was called at the time, but that's really really what kind of drove that. And then I got a job in a hotel there, so I was really fortunate. I ended up at the Williamsburg Inn in Williamsburg, Virginia. I was like, I'll just get a job in any restaurant. Could have been anywhere, but unfortunately found a place where people had gone to culinary school. They were real professional chefs, and they really set me on the right path of moving into, going to culinary school, going to the Culinary Institute of America in New York. But I think that was kind of the real first piece where you saw somebody kind of take you under your wing. There's this lady Claudia in Garmager, and she just cracked the whip, and I was 16 with like braces and glasses working in this place with all these like lifers, in the culinary world. So she really took me under her wing and pushed me forward, and really was fortunate to kind of find one mentor after another kind of through school. So yeah, that was kind of I consider myself sort of a culinary orphan. Um, I didn't have, like I was smelling the garlic from my grandmother's, table, like kitchen when I was coming up in life. And so I think that's part of the reason I wanted to cook was you discover food along the way, and you're like, this can actually be something special, and something that brings people together, as opposed to like just we got to eat dinner. So that's kind of the early years of getting started.
That's how it all began. And during culinary, and that's that story isn't very common. I mean, oftentimes people kind of like doing it, and then they reach a point where they're like, okay, what next? So you're in
Yeah.
culinary school, and with that comes structure and all those other things. What opportunities did you get? I think I saw somewhere that you spent time in France, and how did you kind of connect into that next phase of your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the key things, and I think one of the things I see and really the best cooks that we have, especially the young students coming through, is that there's just a sense of wanting to do more, right? Wanting to do more than like just go to school. So, we're right down the street here in St. Helena from Culinary Institute at Greystone. And, we have a lot of students work for us. They go to school, they work part-time, they do their extern. But I was fortunate to work at the Escoffier Room at the time. Now it's the Bocuse restaurant, and I worked there all the way through my program. And two things happened by doing that. One was I felt like I really doubled my education. I was like working in this student run kitchen all the way through school in addition to classes. And then secondarily, I really built that relationship with the chefs that I worked for in there. And in fact, they're the ones that helped send me to France. And so I think really kind of understanding the importance of hard work and doing the extra piece, doing that extra bit. And like I never saw it as work. I thought it was super fun. I got to work in this kitchen, and the chef's kind of taking me under his wing, and everyone was terrified of Chef Chenou, like this old school French guy. And we were like friends. Like, I mean, I was a 17, 18-year-old kid, but he like liked us because we came in and we worked hard and we didn't complain, and like we weren't scared of him, and you kind of found like his softer side. That no But I mean, people would switch classes from AM PM just to avoid this guy. And so it was great. I loved it. I made so many great relationships that I still have, like through students and people coming through. But the France piece was like really a key, and I didn't really realize it at the time, but for me, that was such a key piece in my journey. And I went to France. I worked there for 6 months, 3 months in two different restaurants. I didn't get paid, and they gave me a place to live. And in fact, I went there with $3,000, and I said, basically, I don't have any money. Can I work 6 days a week? And they were like, no problem. So I worked 6 days a week. So because I didn't have any. I mean, I spent $1,500 in 6 months,
Wow.
just working, and for me, it was still one of the best times of my life. I had no bills to pay. I had no paycheck coming in. It was just super simple, and it was all about learning the food, the language, the culture. And in fact, learning French during that time would come back to be just a huge asset in Bocuse Store, and even impact my role with them now. So um, yeah, I think it's interesting to me because I feel like kids these days, everyone coming up, they want to get to a certain level, and it was always that way when I was in school too. But the patience to like just dig in for that first 5, 6, 7 years, however long it takes, um, there's just so much importance to that. And being willing for me, if, like going to work in France for free was like, this is like free school, right? Like I'm paying all this money to go to culinary school. I think I learned more in 6 months in France than I did in 2 years in culinary
I,
school.
I love it. Is
Yeah.
that for someone who's listening, whose dream is to kind of do that? Is that even common now? I mean, I hear that common in the past, and things are different in every country, obviously.
Yeah.
But is that common practice even now?
So I think it's definitely harder, right? Like the laws have changed and things like this. However, I think I just interviewed a young man. I met him in Bocuse Store this past month in January, and he worked at the Ledbury in London. And I was like, he's from Atlanta, this young kid, career changer, was going to be an engineer and all this kind of thing. And he came I- into the restaurant to stage with us, and I asked him, I'm like, so how did you end up at the Ledbury? Did someone send you there? He's like, no, I just called them. And I was like, that's what it takes, right? Like the sense of like, hey, this would be really cool. I don't know if this is the possibility, but let me go figure it out. And he called them, and I mean anybody like myself who gets someone who's got this level of determination and commitment, like it's always going to be a yes. You just got to work through the details. So he went there for 2 months. They tried to extend, to get an actual visa, but I think a lot of things had changed, and it's expensive. So even if it's just a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever you can do, it's absolutely worth going and seeing and being exposed to that, because it just opens up, not just the culinary aspect of what you're going to learn being in that kitchen, but wherever you are, the culture, the cuisine, and the impact that has is pretty lasting, and it's a huge confidence builder. For me, if I'm gonna open a French restaurant, I'm not just reading a book, or I'm like, I live there. Like, I know what it feels like, and it's a huge confidence boost to understanding a culture and a cuisine as well, just being there.
Yeah, that's great advice because everyone has a different path, and there is a lot to be said about determination and risk taking when you can, and your own personal risk tolerance, and then actually taking action to that and seeing where that gets you. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
And so,
100%.
so take us back to you're in France, you get all this experience, and you come back. Now what?
Yeah, I came back broke. I had $1,500 that I spent in 6 months, and then I spent $1,500 in 2 weeks just traveling around with some friends who came to meet me. And then I came back. My dad gave me I think $3,000, this the magical number, to like move to New York City. So I moved to New York. I got a job at Le Bernardin. A friend of mine was working there, so I kind of went in and was like, "Can I stage?" And they were like, "Sure." So I got a job there working at the bottom on Canapé Station, and we found an apartment in Astoria, Queens, and we had no furniture. I remember, like, for the first couple weeks, we argued over the paint bucket we found on the side of the road. That was our one seat, one chair. We're like, I get the chair tonight, And this is a thing that kind of kills me today, because like at that time, like being in France, I mean, I had no money, but I thought it was like the best time of my life. Like, I'm like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm in France. I can't believe I'm in New York. I can't believe I'm working at Bernardin. And that was, maybe I'm just a simple person, but like that was enough for me. Like, that I had this opportunity and I was doing this. And I think maybe I was just a glutton for punishment. I mean, the chef hired me, and he's like, well, here's what you're gonna make. And it was 295 a week that I was my take home pay, working 50 hours a week in New York City. And he's like, well, you can only go up from there. And I was like, I don't think that's a good thing, but thank you.
Yeah,
you know
we chef.
so yeah. And but I loved it. I was there, I was in the middle of New York City. I mean, it was super intimidating. And it's just like anywhere you go and you're like, I'm gonna be the worst guy here, and I don't know if I'm gonna make it. And then you get in and realize, like, just hard work, dedication, keep your mouth shut and do a good job. Like, people, that's all. There's, that whole thing of like, do the things that it doesn't take talent to do, show up on time, be committed, have a good attitude, be a team player. All those things go so far in any job. And yeah, I spent basically 3 years there. I went from canapé station all the way up to sous chef. And I think I was 23 when I came a sous chef there. And it was a great formative kitchen. I think, to me, it was the perfect place to go at my stage, somewhere where I could just kind of come up through the ranks. And then, in that was in 2003. And then, I basically had told them, "Hey, I'll be a sous chef here, but I'm committed to this new project that Thomas Keller is going to open, per se, in January of 2004." And so they kind of knew that was my plan. We communicated about that, and so I kind of went from there into the opening of per se in 2004.
And I'm gonna expand on that a little bit because this is something common that I'm hearing. I think it's important. Is this communication of like your next step? Is
Yeah,
you're working somewhere, assuming you're doing a great job. You build this rapport with your team, your management, and keeping this level of communication with what you want, and making your leadership. Part of the conversation is something
yeah,
that I think we see as a beneficial thing, especially when you're planning and moving. Usually, your management, especially if you've been doing a great job, is supportive of that, and they'll help you. Right? And that's
yeah.
that's something that I think sometimes gets lost when people are looking for a change or they're looking for something different or more.
Yeah, and I think the culture that existed, when I was coming up through, what we refer to as the old school mentality. I think there's a lot of positives to the drive and the push that gave you. But I think we as chefs in today's world, like, we need to evolve. I remember talking to Kyle Connaughton at Single Thread, and he's like, we either can die or evolve, and it's challenging. Like, my chef de cuisine came from 11 Madison Park, New York, and um getting him to understand and getting our team to understand that, like, this idea of communicating with our team and having sort of this emotional intelligence, just under like just sensing where people are in life. Like, you just never, it's not just work, right? People have lives, we all have things going on. But everybody in our kitchen has a mentor in the team, and they're responsible for spending at least 5 minutes a week as a minimum, just to check in. How are you doing? How are things going? What can we do better? Here's how you're doing. Everybody today wants feedback. It's like, Jeff, can I get 5 minutes? Jeff, can we talk about this? And so it's like, let's just build this in to what we do. And in terms of the leaving the restaurant piece, it's such a huge important thing, right? And I remember Chef Keller was always like, this 2 week notice thing, like, this doesn't work, and like, we need to change this, and like, who came up with this? And what I realized is, well, it's our fault, right? Like, when somebody gave their notice, they immediately got sent to the Komi kitchen. They were immediately sort of sidelined. And part of that was like, okay, like, we need a trained person in the next role. But like, why would you tell somebody earlier that you were going to be leaving if you knew that as soon as you did so, there would be sort of this negative impact? And so we totally changed that now. And, for example, I have a young kid who's been working for me for 2.5 years, and, I kind of heard and knew that he wanted to go to Mexico. So, I just sat him down and I'm like, what's the plan? Like, what do you want to do? And so we've kind of mapped out his whole plan. Most of our team, with obvious some exceptions, especially some of the younger team, it's 3, 4, 6 months out that we're talking about what's next, whether that's, moving into a more senior role with us, or whether it's moving out. And, we make these crazy grandiose statements, like, we want to be the most impactful restaurant group in the country, right? Like, why not? Right? Let's just say that out loud. And so part of that is not just, what we're going to do in the four walls of our building, and the food that we're going to create, and what people are going to see from a distance or experience, in our dining rooms. But it's I think we'll have a bigger impact on the people we send out into the world, right? And people who like take our culture, take who we are and what we believe in, and then go and then replicate that or have an influence elsewhere. So for me, it's super important that people are leaving us set up for success, and have that confident next step in their journey. So it's challenging. It takes everybody from all sides to be a part of that, but that's a huge piece for us, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And lots of important pieces of advice, both hidden and out in the open there. Um,
Hmm.
and you see it in the industry as well. You see people, who are influenced by, who have, been taught by, who learn, and then they take that into their own, business or leadership position, and then put it back out. And so that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're at Per Se, and I see you spent quite some time with Chef Keller.
Yeah, this was a long journey. Yeah, still going. Uh,
um, so take me through those career decisions.
yeah, I mean, I think it's probably one of the most impactful decisions I made, for sure, was going to Per Se, in 2004. And I was at Le Bernardin. Michelin hadn't come yet to New York, but four-star New York Times, and Zagat was the big thing back then. And so I mean, we were at the top of New York City. And when I went to Per Se, I was like, I'm a sous chef here, and everybody that went to Per Se was like, every chef took a step down to be a sous chef, every sous chef took a step down to be a cook. It was like the most amazing team that was put together for the opening of that. And I was immediately humbled in every possible way, just by who I was surrounded by, the level of experience there, and also the stark realization of how little I knew uh, about such a bigger world of food, and the attention to detail and the level of thoughtfulness in every ingredient and where it came from. And I still have my per se training binder that we use as an example, and what we do here. And I think that was just, it was such an overwhelming experience. And just, you were like drinking from the fire hose like every day. And being part of, for me, if anybody gets the opportunity to be part of an opening, with the right people, like, even if it's not the type of food you think you want to do one day, whatever it is, it's such a valuable experience, to see that come to life. So that was kind of really the beginning of my journey, and kind of just a totally different. drive and push in terms of becoming, in my mind, a much more well-rounded professional. And I spent 3 years, 3.5 years at Per Se, kind of became a sous chef after a year there and worked my way through the team there. I went to California, to Yountville here, stayed at Peter Jacobson's, who's now our farmer. Um, and I was just kind of in this like magical place. Like, I spent a morning at the farm and, there's like the birds are chirping and the sun's coming up and there's like hot air balloons over your head. And I'm like, I feel like I'm living in a postcard right now. And that was kind of the first inkling of like interest in in what California was all about. And, towards my time in New York. I love New York, but I knew, my daughter was born and we were like, okay, like I think I don't want to raise my kids in New York City. And, watching my wife shove a stroller onto the rush hour subway, was kind of a galvanizing moment for that.
It is an
So,
art form.
yeah, for sure. And she was great at it, trust me. But that was kind of the beginning of sort of the push towards California. And Corey Lee was at French Laundry and offered me to be the exec sous there, and then I went to Bushon and they had offered me the chef de cuisine job. And that kitchen was getting ready to be remodeled, and for me it just came down to a decision of impact. And I loved Corey, and I'm still a little remiss that I didn't have that opportunity to take that, but I went to take that chef de cuisine job at Bushon. And I wanted to learn the business side of things. I wanted to learn more of not just fine dining and kind of challenge myself to be, more well-rounded. And I think looking back on it, I think that was such a great decision to really understand the business. And, I took over Bouchon in 2007 at the beginning of a of a huge remodel, and then the recession hit right after that. And so I learned through the School of Hard Knocks just all the financial side of the world. And I think that's something that is a huge important piece and something that we now train all of our team on how to read a P&L. All the management team is part of this, because I've seen a lot of great cooks go out into the world, a lot of great chefs, and take over their next thing, or take the cool deal, or the guy who has all the money, and then 1, 2, 3 years down the road it's all kind of falling apart, whether they didn't know how to run the business or whether it was really about the wrong partners, the wrong real estate deal, whatever it might be. And so it's in today's world, you just can't ignore the importance of that. And I tell my team like sustainability is like one of our core principles, and it has a lot to do, I should say, with where the chickens come from and the farm and everything else, but it has a lot more to do with longevity, right? And like we're celebrating, this restaurant our 20-year anniversary. I've been here 5.5 years, but we're going to be here for the next 20 years, and we don't get distracted by the new cool thing that's up and coming and got nominated for this or whatever it might be. And then a year later, you're like, where'd those guys go? So, having that kind of mindset where like, I need all the tools in my toolbox, and, working for the right people who are going to give you those things. So going to Bouchon was like a huge transition away from Per Se. And like, I walked into a pretty crazy situation there, but, that was, I love the challenge. I'm not shy of doing the hard things for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely rowdy and fun and in a whole different way.
Yeah, I
But
walked into the dining room the first night. I'm like, wow, this is loud. Like, how does this? I was like, how does this work? Right? Like, coming from a tasting menu only restaurant, and then all of a sudden it's like 200 people and everything's a la carte, and it's just loud and fast paced, and it's like a frenzy. But learning how to do that style of service and do it in such a way that it was controlled and organized, and like we were in charge, not just suffering victims of whatever came through the door. And that really has had a long-term impact on me, and not just on the casual side but also on the fine dining side.
yeah, yeah. And then you went back into fine dining.
Yeah, so I spent 3 years, 3.5 years at Bouchon. um and then I kind of gotten bored. I did, Bouchon. It was an amazing experience and like great for me to be there. menu changed, and I was trying to change menu like 6 times a year, and then Bushon, Beverly Hills opened, and then it became a more of this, like, the conversation started to shift of like, I think we're going to change all the restaurants' menus at the same time, and like, that just wasn't exciting to me. Not because I didn't want to collaborate with other team members, but more like I had the garden across the street. It was literally my backyard. I lived across the street from the French Laundry, and so I'm like, Vegas is totally different than us. LA has different, their season starts a month before ours. And so, um, I'd done these regional dinners and things like that. And, so Chef Keller came to me, and I didn't really see the opportunity coming back around, but he came and asked me to be exec sous at French Laundry. Corey had left and Tim had taken over, Tim Hollingsworth. And so, there was kind of a big shift in the team, when that happened, and so I obviously said yes and kind of stepped into that role. I went back to Per Se for a few weeks and did some cross training, and then yeah, kind of stepped into the whole world of fine dining all over again. And it was, so much had changed. It was really fascinating. So much had changed in that 3.5 years. All the hydrocolloids had come in that weren't there before, and Jonathan Beno was very traditional running, Per Se, and everything had changed since then. And I was like, is this okay that we're doing this? Like, this was like totally like, don't touch this stuff. And so, um, it was a lot of fun. Matt Peters came in, and a few other guys. And so that was our team. And, it's very different being at French Laundry, which was like the OG, restaurant there. And Thomas lives behind the restaurant. And so, there's definitely a different energy and a different vibe, but learning to take on that more senior leadership role there was a new challenge. And from that came sort of watching Bocuse d'Or happen and watching some of the other chefs come through with Richard Rosendale. And then I did a dinner with them. So we did a dinner. It was like the team from Per Se, and Eli Kaime, and Chef Keller's brother, Devin Nell. Like, there's like five of us, and we went to do a dinner in Lyon for the Grand Chef's dinner. So it's like 250 Michelin stars under one roof. No pressure,
No
right?
pressure. Yeah.
Elaine Ducasse is doing two courses next to us, and then it's us over there. And this is like the first time going back to France, and so I was actually pretty surprised that, like, my, when you're there and you spend 1, 2, 3, 4 days, it starts all coming back to you. And so it's like actually pretty helpful. But we did the dinner, we did the event that night, and then the following day I went to Bocuse d'Or, because that was the day the U.S. team was competing, and we had the opportunity to go. And I was just I was just sucked in. Like, I walked into this stadium, there's like this huge arena, 2,500 screaming fans, and there's like this band from the UK that I heard these tunes in my head for like the next 3 weeks. All the Japanese guys face painted, banging the drums and things like this. And so, but just like watching the the intensity of the competition and the focus of the chefs there, and this like culinary wizardry like on display, like watching people do things and you're like, how did they do that, was just super fascinating. And we went to Paul Bocuse restaurant that night, the following day, with Chef Keller, and actually Paul Bocuse sat at our table with us for a while, and had this amazing dinner and some pretty incredible chartreuse and way too much cheese. But as we're leaving, they carve all the names. They have these plaques that they put all the names of the past winners in front of the restaurant. So there's this sort of walk of fame, if you will, into the restaurant with all the winners from 1987 on. And I just remember looking at the plaques where 2015 was going to be next, and I'm like, USA needs to be here, and like, we the best chefs in this country are on par with what I saw there. And that was kind of where, the seed was planted of jumping into this whole world that I had really no clue where to start. But that was kind of where I kind of caught the bug for Bocuse d'Or.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got USA on the map, on the wall, I should say, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was such a crazy journey. I talked to Chef Keller, and we agreed that I would pursue this, and told him, this was, I think I can do this. I think this is the next step. And part of it was, there was a sense of frustration, like they had put the new group together, and everybody thought it was going to be this guy and then this guy. And, there's just always missing pieces and missing parts. And, I spent the next year just crawling into this hole of discovery and challenge and failure. And um, it was really foreign to me, the idea that I was going to spend this much time on one day, right? And on one set of food. We had changed the menu at French Laundry and per se every night, right? Like we sat down at the end of the night, you went over the menu, everybody contributed, and I'm like, how does this work? Like, how do I like where do I start? Like, and so that was a real formative piece for me, just learning, how to like develop food at a different level. And, I think it's funny because part of my goal in our restaurant is to show that there's a place in the world for this style of food. Um, and certainly there's so much of it that's like overly contrived and, looks cool, but probably doesn't taste great. But I've never spent more time focused on flavor and taste than in training for that competition, which probably most people wouldn't expect to hear. But it's over 50% of your score. So like you have to be focused on that. And I think that's something a lot of people sort of forget. But I've learned so much about myself in that. And I think, I'm not a competition chef, despite, what I've done in the competition world. I truly believe that, spending your time working for the best people is the most important thing. And you can always learn the competition side of things. It's really hard to go the other way, to know how to do a competition, but not really understand, all of the technique and layers of experience you need in the culinary world. And so for me, it was really about applying all of that discipline that I had learned over the last 10 years working for Chef Keller into that opportunity. And, um, I love supporting my team to do competitions. Vincenzo did the um, Bocuse selection, 2 years ago, and he's actually just did Top Chef, so he'll be on Top Chef this year. But I just love supporting our team doing these things because I know how much it shapes an individual. And, the most important thing is to make sure it's not having a negative impact on the restaurant or the rest of the team, which is challenging, no question. But you discover so much about yourself when you push yourself to that limit and to that level. And like, I've never been like, I was definitely in that moment at the most high performing level I've ever been in, physically, mentally, in every possible way. So, um, yeah, it's pretty it's very hard to explain that, right, to other chefs and to get people behind that idea because everyone just looks at it as a distraction. But when you see the reward that it brings, people come to us, at press because they know I'm a part of this, and Franco was the commis for Bocuse d'Or 2 years ago. He's working for us. Bradley just finished Bocuse d'Or. He came and he's working for us now. And, both of these guys want to compete in this in the future. And so, for us, it's a great benefit to that we attract this level of talent, and it all kind of just multiplies, as we
Yeah.
get more and more great people, in that circle.
I love it. And not only did you personally get on the podium as the first American medalist, as a silver medalist, but then you went on to coach the team that then
Hmm.
got the gold, 2 years after. And this is a every 2 year event. So I had the pleasure of actually being at that event, which was just incredible. It's really hard to describe, like you said, but there's
Yeah.
no denying that there's this overwhelming sense of pride, even just as somebody that's just a spectator watching, USA compete and win. So, all this amazing experience, getting the US on the map, literally, at Bocuse d'Or, then as a silver medalist, then coaching the Team USA, into the gold medal, top of the podium, and then coming back to reality in a way,
Hmm.
back
Yeah.
to business as usual, but not without a lot of fanfare because it was quite an accomplishment. And I know you and the team and anybody who followed along or heard about it were very proud. And it was also a great way to actually get people to understand and see what this was, right? I think a
Yeah.
cookbook followed, et cetera, and then your new projects. So fast forward to the amazing things that you have been doing at Press for the past 5 years, and then these incredible projects that you have underway that I was very fortunate enough to take an initial tour of. I would say the culmination of all of your experiences, your learnings, and your experiences into what you're building now. So take us through a little bit, what's on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most people know, but I mean, like I mentioned earlier, Press is celebrating its 20-year anniversary. So, it's a restaurant with a very colorful history. I came in 2019. I was supposed to be a consultant for 30 hours a week, 4 months. Not sure why I thought that would work out, but I brought in Daryl Bell, who now has a State Line Road Smokehouse over here. But we came in and we sort of took on this restaurant that was really struggling. They had Leslie Rudd, who was the founder. He had passed away 2 years earlier. His daughter Samantha had taken over. They've been through like 7 chefs in 2 years, and so I'll spare you the gory details. But just to say that, like, where we started from in this restaurant was never really the plan. And I think I make a lot of plans, and I just have learned to be flexible and to make the most out of where you are, right? And I think that's a key message for people today. And I basically kind of got into this. I was going to open my own restaurant. 2 months into the starting at Press, that restaurant project fell through, and I was like, oh man, I can't get stuck here. This is like this kind of steakhouse that's like trying to find its way in the world again. And I'm like, this is not what I've worked 10.5 years for Thomas Keller for. But they were very excited about what we had been doing there. And, I basically agreed. I'm like, look, I'll stay on. I'll become a partner in this business. And then, but the commitment is that we're going to open my thing. Right. And so we were still going to pursue that together, with Samantha Rudd, who, is still my partner and our owners here today. So basically we kind of set off in this new thing. We were going to announce I was going to be a partner here, and then COVID hit in March 2020. And we all know what happened for the next, year and a half of that, just survival mode, and then the huge challenge of just reopening. But through all of that was a silver lining of hiring a new team, changing the menu, and we dropped a lot of the old things. And so that 21, 22, those 2 years was a huge shift and transition in the restaurant. And so since then we got our first Michelin star grand award
Congrats.
from Wine Spectator. Thank you. Yeah, and it's made such a difference for us. I think I have a love-hate relationship with awards because everything's subjective, and there's always politics and everything, no matter what anybody says. But for us, it's not why we do them, but it should be a natural result of what we do. But they just help, right? They help put you on the map. They help people recognize you. For us, the most important thing is it helps people, staff and team come to us, and see who we are. And so that was a huge shift as well, just getting that recognition. And now we're what's happening at Press now is we're remodeling all the kitchens, as I mentioned, and we're really pushing for the next level, right? So it's no secret that we're moving towards 2 stars here. We're going to expand sort of the lounge piece, so we'll have kind of more of a casual experience. Then we'll have fine dining that'll be more focused on a more expansive tasting menu, as well as our private dining. All will have kind of three separate focuses at Press. And then understudy is the new big thing. So we have understudy, which is actually right next door to us. For those who know, Dean and DeLuca, was one of the original gourmet stores, yeah, kind of the precursor to Whole Foods in some ways. But um, we are basically moving in that space, and it's 10,000 square feet. Half of it is going to be this new museum. So they're opening with a Julia Child exhibit in there, which is really cool. I was in there yesterday, and just an amazing sense of nostalgia from someone that really most people don't know now, growing up perhaps, but really transformed the culinary landscape and knowledge and interest in food in this country. And so having that kind of right along understudy, which is going to be kind of like a marketplace. We're going to have a pastry shop, very high end pastry, viennoiserie, cold pastries, packaged goods. And then we're going to have basically like a cafe. So it'll be super fun. Everything comes on a tray, logoed paper, multiple things on the same tray, and kind of we'll have like black truffle mole, octopus, crispy pig's ears, charcoal oven roasted turnips and with Benton's bacon and things like this. So it's going to be just super fun, craveable. We did this lobster corn dog with caviar for the music festival here, and people go crazy over it. So we're like, hey, let's throw this in there. So it's meant to be like super playful, fun, but also a very high level of layer of of technique and sophistication in there. We're also going to have a butcher shop that's going to have dry aged fish and meat. So we're working with dry ager and kind of we have a whole program going on with them right now. So that's super exciting. And for me, it's a whole place where we can just continue learning. And, that's kind of what's behind the name is, that we're always, it's a little play on words. We're always going to be understudy there. We're always going to be looking to learn and grow and explore new techniques. And, at the end of the space, we have what we're calling the culinary lab. So it's going to be a teaching kitchen space, consumer facing classes, but also a lot of digital media content that we hope to eventually use to have an impact in an educational way, but will be entertaining and fun, and kind of be like a R&D space for us as well. So super exciting. This should be opening April 2025. So we're finally getting there. All the equipment's coming in, finally getting all the last pieces in. So it's gonna be a huge lift. And we're building an amazing team for that. We're really excited about the team that's come together, and still a few more pieces to add. Plug. But between the evolution and direction of press and what understudy represents, and the space that we have here right in the center in the heart of Napa Valley, which is such a food and wine focused destination. It feels really special. It feels really amazing, and I feel really fortunate to be doing what we're doing. Sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this? When the days get tough, but we always find a way through, and it's really the collective effort of the team that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, well, I for one cannot wait to get a chance to visit. I got the spoiled with the pre-tour and getting to see the vision, and once that's the reality, it's gonna be something extraordinary. So congrats to you and the team, and rooting for a successful completion with no bumps in the road. With
Yeah, we'll
construction or
take that.
electricity or
Yeah,
all those things, right?
appreciate
Putting the
that.
positive juju out there for smooth
Yeah,
construction, right? That's all I can
yeah,
ask for. Um, well, let's do some quick fire now
sure.
here. All right, first one. What advice would you tell your younger self?
I would say be patient. Yeah, just focus on the day, focus on where you're at. I think I have a tendency to always be focusing on the next thing, which sometimes can be a positive, but just learning to enjoy the journey, as opposed to just focusing on the goals.
What's your advice for someone struggling in the industry?
Probably the same advice.
Be patient.
Yeah, just I think somebody struggling in the industry, I'll answer that two ways. One is, if you really know this is what you want to do, then be patient and stick with it, and dig in. If I will say this is probably the worst industry to be in if you don't love what you do. And I used to tell people that, walking in the doors at French Laundry, I'm like, you're either gonna love this job or hate this job. There's very little gray area here, and if it's what you love to do, it's an amazing journey. If it's something that you're like trying to make work and you really aren't passionate about it, it's maybe looking at a different facet in the industry versus pushing, trying to make something happen that maybe doesn't feel right.
What's your advice for fellow hospitality leaders?
I would say I would give them the advice I'm giving myself, which is always developing yourself as a leader. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to just kind of be like, I've done this and I've taken this journey and now I'm a great leader. But really challenging yourself to be a leader, reading things outside of the hospitality business, and really understanding the impact we can have on people and individuals outside of just, focus on the new cool dish or whatever new thing we want to do or the thing we want to be recognized for. But there's a lot of power in people, and learning how to be an example, to be able to mentor your team. A huge part of what I do now is really growing that team. We're expanding, and so that's a whole new challenge for me. It's one thing when you're always there and you're touching everything, but learning to trust other people and learning how to make sure that they feel empowered, they feel properly trained, and they also feel supported. I think that's my biggest challenge is how do I support this team, but also give them enough leash and runway to do it for themselves. So yeah, always be growing as a leader. Always make sure that you're in a place where you're learning yourself.
I love it. Love it. With that, thank you so much, Chef Phil.
Yeah,
so
thanks for having me.
excited to
Super
see
fun.
all the upcoming things, and can't wait to hear more about it. And please document the journey and share on social media.
We'll do it. Don't worry. Yeah.
Follow along, everyone.
We'll be coming along. All right. Thanks so much, Alice.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Remember, success looks different for everyone in hospitality. No two paths are the same. If you have a leader or a topic you want to hear about, email media@culinaryagents.com. Hospitality on the Rise is brought to you by Culinary Agents, connecting top talent with employers since 2012. Whether you're hiring or looking for your next opportunity, join us at culinaryagents.com. For more inspiration, subscribe to Hospitality on the Rise and visit hospitalitycareerpaths.com, a free platform by Culinary Agents. Until next time, keep rising.